Hi guys, thanks for joining me for episode 14 of Sketch Support. I've got a fun announcement coming up, so hang tight for just a second. First though, if you are a new viewer, Sketch Support is all about learning how to use, adapt, and customize a sketch to fit your needs. I try to show how you can adapt any sketch to fit different photos, different styles, different products and supplies, and different themes and ideas. And I do all of this by using one sketch as the starting point for multiple layouts. This month, I have a new 2-page sketch that I am using, and you can download it for free at scrapbookgeneration.com. I'll link to it down below in the video description. And if you have a second, I would really appreciate it if you would hit that subscribe button as well. There's also another 3-page PDF of 22 bonus sketch examples that provide a visual of some of the many different variations you can create with this one sketch. You can mix and match those different variations for endless possibilities, and I'll link to that as well. Now we can get to the announcement. I'm very excited to tell you that the Scrapbooking Sketch Support group on Facebook is now open. I've talked about this a few times in previous videos, so I'm really excited to finally have it all set up. The plan and purpose of this group is having a place to easily share and organize layouts based on all of the free Sketch Support sketches. So there are layout gallery photo albums in this group for each of the 19 Sketch Support sketches. I've got my layouts uploaded in them, and I invite you to upload your layouts into these albums as well. If you've been in any of my classes, I've got it set up the same as those, so you should find it really easy to navigate. We've been doing this Sketch Support challenge for months now, and there's just no way on a Facebook page to organize those in a way that you can easily find past challenges and sketches to see all of the layouts. However, in a group, we can create these albums and it keeps all of the layouts organized. And if you want to go back and see layouts and get some inspiration from a particular sketch, it's going to be much easier to find them when they are all in one place. And I love that we're going to have a single gallery for each sketch. And like I said, if you've created a layout from any of these 19 sketches, I invite you to share them in this group. And I will add a link to the group down below so you can join us. The Sketch Support Challenge and $20 giveaway will continue this month, and this time it will take place in the Sketch Support group instead of on my Facebook page. I'll have all the details for that down below on my Facebook page and in this Facebook group as well. So hopefully everyone can easily find it and join us for this challenge. It's always so much fun to see all of the different layouts, and I really think we'll all enjoy this group and having it organized this way. So now let's get this Sketch Support video started with a quick look at the sketch that I've used as the starting point for the 5 layouts I'm sharing with you today. This 2-page sketch uses a lot of paper with 2 large backgrounds, one that is going horizontally across both pages and then one that is vertical from top to bottom on the left page. There are also some accent strips on the edges of the background pieces, and then there are several vertical banner strips framing this section of 3x5 inch photos. On the left page, there is this block of 3x3 inch photos and a journaling piece with some embellishments clustered near the top and bottom corners. And I admit this sketch is a little out of my comfort zone, and that probably sounds weird because I'm the one who designed the sketch, but really this is not typically the way I design a sketch. If you look back through my past layouts or sketches, you'll see that most of the time, and maybe not all of the time, but most of the time, my photos are connected in some way across the 2 pages. Most often, I look at a 2-page design as one solid 24 by 12 inch space instead of 2 12 by 12 inch spaces. So I usually will find a way to connect the photos or the design. The biggest exception to that statement is when I create my large photo block layouts and sketches where one side of the layout is completely covered with photos and cards, and then the other side of the layout follows a more traditional scrapbook design. With those designs, I'm looking at each page as a separate design. I try to do things that coordinate to make it a cohesive design, but in the end, it's 2 pages created with 2 different design concepts. With this sketch, there are 2 sections, one on each side of the layout, that don't really have a connection to each other than they are on the same layout, and then this horizontal background does stretch across both pages. Really, the embellishments are the design element that brings the whole layout together and frames in those photos, even though those photos are in 2 different sections on the layout. And I know that doesn't sound super crazy, but it is definitely a push outside of my comfort zone. But I'll tell you that I am a big believer in pushing yourself out of your comfort zone in many areas of life. And scrapbooking is a place that I try to do that from time to time, whether it's with the design or products or techniques. Because to me, at worst, it's a lesson learned, which to me is still a positive thing. And at best, you end up discovering something new that you love. And to me, that's a risk-reward scenario that I think is definitely worth it. With this layout, I feel like I stayed pretty close to the sketch in regards to the overall design. Now, when you get into the individual details, it's a little different, and I definitely customized it to fit my movie night and popcorn theme. On the left side of the sketch, there are 5 3x3-inch photos, and I swapped those out for 9 3x2-inch photos. I made that swap for 2 reasons. The first is that I had a lot more photos than I wanted to include, and the second is that these photos can't be cropped into a square without cropping out Drew or Jackson. So I needed to find a way to include more and use a rectangle photo instead of the square. So I opted for the 3x2-inch size. Since the photos have the same 3-inch width as the photos on the sketch, I didn't have to make any adjustments width-wise. The extra photos did add a little more height to this photo block, but there's plenty of room for it, so it didn't require any special adjustments for it to work. You could take that photo block all the way to the top and bottom, and this still works. On the right side, I used the same 3x5-inch photos as you see on the sketch. I went a little theme heavy with the details on this layout, and I ended up removing the smaller strips on the edges of the vertical background and then the striped strips on the edges of the horizontal background. And this was just to help me simplify things a little because I went so heavy with the theme and I didn't want to overwhelm everything. And I know those are small strips, so most likely they aren't going to overwhelm anything, but I had a very specific look in my head, and those small strips just weren't needed for it. Now, typically I will use a stripe as an accent piece. I like to use stripes in small strips, like you see on the sketch, as an accent to help tie all the colors of the layout together. Now, I'll use stripes for more than that, but that's probably the most common way I use them. But I went the opposite of that with this layout and used a stripe for the large vertical background piece. I loved that the red and white stripe matched the red and white striped popcorn boxes in the photos, and I thought that would make a really great background piece for this layout. Instead of using the stripe strips, I loved the idea of using lots of popcorn die cuts along the edges. They are kind of peeking out from behind this horizontal background piece. I'm always looking for ways to incorporate the theme into the design. My brain seems to always want to find a way to play up the theme. You could easily adapt this idea to pretty much any shape or theme, and it creates this really interesting border that frames your layout design and photos. I used my silhouette to cut out several different shapes and sizes of popcorn in a variety of pattern papers. I added a stitch border to most of them. Most of the time when I'm working with a simple shaped die cut, I'm going to add a stitch border. I like the detail, texture, and interest it brings to that plain die cut. Some of the popcorn pieces are adhered flat on the layout, somewhat tucked behind the background piece. For those, I stitched on them after I adhered them to the layout. Then there are a few that are adhered with foam adhesive for a little dimension to help them pop off the page, no pun intended. For those, I stitched on them before I adhered them to the layout. To complete the popcorn look, I added some Nuvo crystal drops, glitter drops, and jewel drops in different shades of yellow in a few spots here and there. For my embellishments, instead of the flowers from the sketch, I created large clusters of movie details and added some more of those popcorn pieces. I started off with some larger details like a film strip and then added some film reels and this little clacker thing, and I have no idea if that's the correct terminology, so I apologize if it's not. Then I went in with some smaller details like the popcorn pieces, some stars, word and phrase stickers, and then more of those Nuvo drops. I repeated this look for my title. I didn't include the film strip, but I've got the film reels, the popcorn, and the stars. My title piece was cut out of a piece of pattern paper. I thought it was cute and pretty much perfect for this layout, so I used it as is. And titles can be so hard to construct sometimes, so I was very thankful for an easy one with this layout. This layout is a really good option for those of you that enjoy working with uncropped 4x6-inch photos. At first glance, you might look at this sketch and with those smaller 3x3-inch photos think that this is one that wouldn't work with only 4x6-inch photos, but it actually does quite easily. On the left page, I used 3 of the photos overlap together in place of the photo block you see on the sketch. It's not quite the same, but it's not that far off either. These 3 photos cover close to the same general area as the photos on the sketch do. They're just arranged a little differently. It's not a complete rectangle like you see on the sketch. There are tons of different photo combinations and arrangements you can use to create that grouping of photos, and it doesn't have to look anything like the sketch. You can overlap, you can tilt them, and make those photos work. A good guideline that is easy to follow when adapting sketches is aiming for your photos to cover the same general area as you see on the sketch. Usually if you can do that, you don't have to make any major adjustments to the design or surrounding elements. On the right page, I used 2 4x6-inch photos in place of the 3 3x5-inch photos. The combined width of the 4x6-inch photos is 8 inches, which is only an inch less than the photos on the sketch at 9 inches. So I didn't have to make any changes to accommodate that. The height of the photos is 1 inch taller, and I did make a few changes to the background papers to work better with that. I really liked how the vertical banner strips gave an opportunity to add in lots of different colors and patterns, but because I used taller photos, if I wanted to use them, I was going to have to increase their height as well as increase the height of the background. I decided to instead eliminate the large horizontal background piece and replace it with taller vertical strips. This way I still have that background that goes across both pages, and I get to use the strips as well. I cut all of my strips into arrow strips with a point at the top and then a little notch at the bottom. I love using arrow strips with boy theme designs, so I thought it would be a good fit here. I also added some coordinating stitched lines on a few of the arrow strips. For the big embellishment clusters, I used a mixture of large stars, some tags, there are some arrow pieces, smaller punch stars, and then some word and phrase stickers. For the 3 largest stars on the layout, I have 2 stars layered together, and then I added a stitch border that matches the color of the largest star. So the orange one has orange stitching, the blue one has blue stitching, and the yellow one has yellow stitching. I also want to point out how I decide to arrange color on a layout. With this layout, I've got the black and white vertical background and then these colorful patterns for the strips. For this design, I really wanted to have an even spread of colors across the layout. And usually I could do that with the strips, but on the left page, there's only room for 2 of the strips. So I knew I was going to have to rely on other elements to give me that spread of colors. The first color I'll talk about is the green. I've got 2 strips on the right page, but none on the left, so I added a green mat to this photo. The second color I did this with is the orange. I've got 2 strips of orange on the right page, so I used an orange star on the left edge of the left page to give me that nice spread of color. And then the next color is the blue. Again, I've got 2 blue strips on the right page, so I used a blue for this star to help complete that spread of blue on the whole layout. I try to pay attention to little details like that to create balance on my layouts. With this layout, I did an opposite action on each side. On the left page, I used a lot more photos, and on the right page, I used less photos. This was one of those situations where I had tons, and I mean tons of photos of Jackson feeding the fish at Dogwood Canyon. This place is so beautiful and he was having so much fun, and as any scrapbooker would know, I just could not stop taking pictures. I wanted to find a way to include as many photos as I could without overcrowding this layout design. My idea was to take that vertical background piece behind the 3x3" photos and make that the photo block instead. This gave me a lot more space for a lot more photos, taking that section of photos from 5 photos all the way to 17 photos. The amazing part is that using that background for photos instead didn't really require major adjustments. I didn't have to really change anything for this to fit. The background was simply transformed into photos. I planned out and cropped my photos to fit the space, and I used a combination of 2x2 inch, 3x2 inch, 3x3 inch, and 4x3 inch photos and a journaling block to create this large photo block. A few of the photos are slightly smaller than those sizes because I added some photo mats here and there. Anytime I have a large photo block like this with photos that are all very similar, I like to throw in some photo mats to help the photos stand out and break up the repetitive setting so that each individual photo is noticed. One of the very first ideas I had for the sketch was using a large panoramic style of photo in place of the 3x5 inch photos on the right page. I absolutely love the look of panoramic photos in scrapbooking, especially ones of beautiful scenery, and I knew that this particular set of photos would be perfect for that style of photo. So I had this photo printed as a 9x5 inch, so it covers the exact same space as the 3x5 inch photos do, so I didn't have to make any changes in order for this larger photo to fit. A big change I made to this layout was replacing strips with shapes, and I did this in 2 different ways. The first one is the most obvious. I swapped out those vertical banner strips for a hexagon design. I was immediately drawn to this hexagon pattern paper from PhotoPlay, and I thought it would make a great background for this photo. I wanted to cut along the hexagon pattern instead of cutting it just into a straight edged mat. To do this, I laid my photo on top of the hexagon paper and then used a pencil to trace along the pattern so I could make sure I liked the hexagon framing before I made any cuts. And then I cut the pattern out with scissors following my pencil line. After I had the hexagon piece adhered to my layout, I had this absolutely insane idea to add stitching along the lines of the pattern, and it took forever, like way longer than I had anticipated. Looking at it with the picture on top, it really doesn't look like there was much to stitch on, but all of those little lines, it was a long process, much longer than I expected. After I completed the 2 million hours of stitching, I wanted to add some dimension to this hexagon piece. So I cut out a few individual hexagons and adhered them around the design with foam adhesive. The second area I replaced a strip with shapes was with the stripe strips. This collection didn't have a stripe anyway, so I wanted to do a decorative border in its place. Sometimes the mood hits and you just want to use something decorative instead of just a plain straight strip. So I used a hexagon punch to cut out several hexagons, and then I cut them in half to create this border. I liked that it fit with the hexagon background piece and had a similar style and gave a slightly different look to that edge. With the embellishments, I did use flowers like the sketch, but not as many as you see on the sketch. With so many more photos and this hexagon detail, I didn't feel like this layout needed too much more. Plus, I had to make some small adjustments since the photo block was enlarged. I really didn't want to put the top right cluster right here on the layout. It just felt a little unbalanced to me. But I still wanted to include that embellishment because I wanted to use it to complete my visual triangle on the layout. My solution was to include that embellishment within the photo block. It's actually placed on top of a few photos in the empty space, so it's not covering important parts of the photo. This layout is a good example of taking one section of the sketch and really focusing on that design and extending it to create the whole layout. The beauty of this sketch is that you can easily take the design on one side and use it as the design for both pages of your layout. You could focus on the right side of the sketch and extend the banner strips and photos across both pages. Or you could focus on the left side of the sketch, like I did here, and extend that design across both pages. I've taken this block of photos and added more to continue the design. Looking at my layout and the 3x3" photo arrangement on the sketch, my layout follows that design concept almost exactly. It's just been extended across both pages. With this set of photos, I had printed them all in 4x3", and while I could make that size work for both sides of the sketch as it is, I really liked the idea of arranging them all in one photo block like you see on the left page of the sketch. When I have photos that are all the same size, especially a smaller size, I like to arrange them all together in one block like this where they each have equal attention. So I know I said that I was working with 4x3" photos, but that's not the size I ended up using on the layout. Because I was only using that photo block on the left as my design, it left me with very little paper incorporated into this design. So I decided to crop my photos down to 3.5 by 2.5 and then use a 4x3" mat for each photo on the layout. This gave me an opportunity to add in some pattern papers and colors while still following that photo block concept. Individual photo mats are a great way to work in some colors to a photo-heavy design. Instead of going with the coordinated clusters on the bottom left and top right of the photo block, I decided to create a scene on my layout. On the left, I cut out tree branches from a pattern paper and layered them over each other. My hope was that they would look like trees to go with my theme. To add some texture and detail, I added a stitch border on the large leaves. And it's so funny because I've had this paper from We Are Memory Keepers forever. And it was one of those papers that I knew I wanted to do something with those branches, but the right opportunity just never came. So I was absolutely giddy, like did an actual happy dance when I was searching for papers for these photos and found this one. That's such a great feeling to have saved a paper for so long because you knew it was special and you finally get to use it. It makes it worth holding on to it for so long. On the right, I used my silhouette to cut out some clouds and a sun. And because I can't seem to not stitch on things, I added some stitching to those pieces as well. Scenes are a lot of fun to create in scrapbooking, and I know that they aren't for everybody, but scenes are a really great way to highlight your theme and create some really interesting elements on your layout. The way I approach it for things on the bottom edge of my layout, I think about things that would typically be on the ground or at the bottom of something like flowers, trees, and grass, or cars, trucks, tractors, and roads, or water, waves, splashes, and fish, or houses or cities. For things on the top edge of the layout, I think about things that would typically be in the sky or above something like clouds, birds, and the sun, or airplanes, spaceships, and UFOs, or stars and the moon, or maybe boats on top of the water. And these are just a few ideas. There are so many possibilities and scenes and designs that you can create and customize to your layout and your theme. Since I only used the photo block on the left page, I was left without a title since it's on the right page of the sketch. And to me, the best fit was to place it with the journaling. I don't do it all of the time, but I do like designs that have the title and journaling together. I feel like they kind of go hand in hand and help bring attention to each other. I had moved my journaling block up one space to better fit with my design, and my title fit in that space comfortably. If I was using a smaller title, I could have placed it near the clouds on the right. But I like that my title mentions the tree and is placed near the tree. It just seems to fit with that part of the scene on my layout. This layout was described on my blog as, are you really going to tell me that this layout came from that sketch? And I promise I'm not trying to fool you here. This layout did come from the sketch. And I think if you hear me walk through my thought process and why I adapted it the way I did, you'll see that I'm not just making wild claims here. What I like about this layout coming from this sketch is that it shows that you don't have to follow a sketch exactly, and you don't have to expect for your end result to look anything like the sketch. Try to look at it as Sketches are not a rule that you have to follow. They are simply a starting point. They can be something that inspires your ideas or your own unique design. You can take the tiniest detail and turn it into something that doesn't even come close to resembling the sketch, and that is completely okay. The first change I made to the sketch was converting it into a one-page layout. You know I'm going to say it. Never let the size of the sketch determine the size of your layout. You can always, and I mean always, find ways to adapt a 2-page sketch into a 1-page layout or a 1-page sketch into a 2-page layout. And I mean always. With this sketch, you've got several 1-page options. Because both sides of the sketch have kind of their own design going on, you could easily use one side for a 1-page layout. You could also combine elements from both sides of the sketch to create kind of a mashup, which is what I did with my layout. I mostly followed the right side of the sketch with the strips behind the photos. But I also found inspiration in how the embellishments framed the photos on the left page. And I ended up being a loose representation of both pages of the sketch. I decided to flip the sketch to better work with my photos. The sketch has vertical photos, and I was using mainly 3.5 by 2.5 inch photos, so flipping the sketch made it work a little better with photos that are horizontal. Flipping the sketch is a great way to accommodate different photo orientation. If the sketch has vertical photos and you have horizontal, flip. If the sketch has horizontal photos and you have vertical photos, flip. It's an easy problem solver, and flipping is also a great way to get a completely different look out of the design of the sketch. I also added an extra photo. With this set of photos, I also had a 2 by 2 inch photo. I added it to the right of my photo arrangement. Since it was a smaller photo, it was easy to just kind of squeeze in there. I ended up using slightly different strips behind my photos. I went a little larger on my strips, and that choice really came down to the pattern paper I was using. This paper from Kaisercraft has this wonderful arrow design, and I decided to take advantage of it. And I just cut along the design of the paper. It was super easy, and I've got a detailed background without a whole lot of work. Because the arrow strips are so detailed, I decided to remove the background piece behind the strips and those stripe strips. The arrow strips are so detailed that I didn't feel like I needed it anymore. Plus, I used a pattern paper for my base paper, so it kind of fills in that background role anyway. To add some texture and dimension to the arrow strips, I added some stitch lines. I think it's a pretty safe bet at this point that if I can stitch on it, I'm going to stitch on it. For my embellishments, I swapped out the flowers for some heart and arrow pieces instead. I added some glitter on top of the arrow pieces to go with the word sparkle in my title piece. I love adding little details like that to support themes and designs. If you look at the arrangement of my hearts, you can see that I followed the embellishment arrangements on the left page of the sketch. I've got one section at the bottom left of my photos and the other section at the top right of my photos. A common issue you might run into when using 2-page sketches for 1-page layouts is you're left without a home for your title or journaling. Maybe the side of the sketch you used doesn't have the title or it didn't have the journaling, so you have to figure out how to work that into what you are creating. I used a little phrase cut out of a pattern paper for my title and arranged it with my photos. Since the photos were quite a bit smaller than what you see on the sketch, there was plenty of room to add it in there without overcrowding that area. For my journaling, I used a 3x4-inch journaling card and tucked it under the photos on the left. This was the first time I used my silhouette for journaling. I was using this 3x4-inch card and I really don't like my handwriting, so I wanted to print my journaling on the card. But because of the way I'm using the card with it tucked behind the photo and then there's a design on the card, I really needed to print in a specific area. And I just thought it would be way easier to accomplish this on my silhouette than it would be on my printer. I used a silhouette sketch pen and then I could use the grid on the mat, and it made it so easy to line everything up and make sure it was sketching in the exact area I wanted. The only downside, and I may be completely wrong because I'm somewhat new to using a silhouette and just haven't had time to explore all of the different details, but the downside I found was that you have to be careful in what font you use. When you type text in silhouette, it types it in an outline format, and maybe there's a way around that. And if there is, I don't listen to what I'm saying. So I had to find a font that was on the skinnier side so that the outlines were really close together. And when it sketches the letters, the lines are close enough together that they look normal and not like an outline of the letter. That's all for the 14th episode of Sketch Support. If you have any questions about anything, be sure to leave a comment and I'll do my best to give you an answer. And don't forget to join the new Sketch Support group on Facebook. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.